Chapter 12. But where is the government? Throughout the pages of this book, we have meticulously laid out the catastrophic economic harm inflicted on African Americans. Centuries of chattel slavery, legal segregation, forced breeding camps, and the bulldozing of over 100 thriving business districts. We have also illuminated modern-day solutions, chief among them Marketplace 365 and community-driven mutual aid strategies to regain lost economic ground. Yet a lingering question arises for many readers. Where does the U.S. government fit into all this? Given the scale of the injustice, shouldn't the federal government shoulder a significant share of the reparative burden? The short answer is yes, it should. The long answer is that, in the face of generational negligence and political inertia, we cannot afford to wait for Capitol Hill. This chapter explores both the historical precedent for U.S. reparations and foreign aid, demonstrating capacity, and why our blueprint cannot hinge on the uncertain goodwill of lawmakers. The government owes a historical debt. 1. Chattel slavery and post-emancipation. By 1860, the economic value of enslaved people surpassed that of America's railroads and factories combined. And as explained in earlier chapters, after emancipation, the 40 acres and a mule promise was revoked, and any meaningful reparative legislation was shut down, setting a precedent of broken governmental promises. 2. Systemic sabotage beyond slavery. State and local authorities enforced Jim Crow laws, enabled racial terror, and later championed urban renewal that uprooted black communities. And even federal initiatives like the New Deal and GI Bill were administered in racially discriminatory ways, depriving black families of the benefits that propelled white middle-class wealth. 3. Unfulfilled calls for reparations. From the era of Reconstruction to the modern day, advocates have repeatedly petitioned the federal government for restitution or land grants, but consistently met with delays, token gestures, or outright dismissal. And various bills, like the perennial H.R. 40 for establishing a reparations study commission, stall endlessly in committee, never fully addressing the multi-trillion-dollar debt. Given these facts, there's an undeniable moral and fiscal obligation for the United States to repay a portion of the wealth siphoned through centuries of exploitation. The capacity to do so is unquestionable. What is absent is the political will, historical precedents. Capacity is not the issue. Critics often argue that reparations are too expensive or too difficult to administer. Yet the U.S. government has a well-documented history of finding the will and the funds when the cause is deemed urgent. 1. Reparations to Japanese Americans. In 1988, the U.S. passed the Civil Liberties Act, granting a formal apology and $20,000 per surviving victim of the Wabaudawu II internment camps. Though far from complete justice, it exemplified that official recompense is both possible and morally consistent with American ideals. 2. Foreign aid to Israel. Year after year, Israel receives billions of dollars in military and economic assistance from the U.S. The rationale: supporting a key ally, addressing historical injustices, and upholding regional stability. Whether one agrees or disagrees with foreign aid levels, it undeniably proves the U.S. can marshal vast resources when it deems a situation a priority. 3. Marshall Plan and post-war reconstruction. After WWOO, the U.S. invested roughly $12 billion, over $100 billion in today's dollars, to rebuild war-torn European nations. This was not a trivial sum, yet it was allocated swiftly and effectively to secure the future of Western democracies. 4. 9/11. Victim Compensation Fund. In the wake of the September 11th attacks, Congress rapidly approved billions in compensation to survivors and the families of the fallen. This reflects the U.S. government's ability to act with unprecedented speed and financial generosity when moral outrage and political consensus converge. Each example underscores a consistent truth. When the nation perceives an issue as urgent and legitimate, money flows. The same impetus should apply to rectifying the massive moral wrong done to African Americans. "We don't have the budget," rings hollow against the backdrop of trillion-dollar defense bills or swift corporate bailouts. We can't wait for Capitol Hill. 1. Stalling tactics and political calculus. Legislative bodies frequently turn to study commissions, indefinite reviews, or partial measures, effectively stalling while generations of Black Americans remain undercapitalized, and even sympathetic lawmakers face political headwinds. with reparations often positioned as a polarizing wedge. 2. Elections and shifting agendas. Promises made on the campaign trail often vanish in the churn of new administrations. And depending on electoral cycles for restitution undermines consistent progress and can erode faith in government efforts. 3. Community-driven solutions. Marketplace 365, mutual aid revivals, and faith-based contributions thrive independently of congressional sessions or state budgets. Instead of pleading with legislators, communities can mobilize and direct their capital on their own terms, immediately. The benefits of government participation, if it comes. While our blueprint does not rely on government approval, we should not dismiss potential collaboration. In fact, federal or local government support would multiply the impact. 1. Matching grants and tax incentives. If the government offers matching dollars for every dollar raised by Marketplace 365 or community-based funds, we'd see exponential growth in resources for rebuilding. Tax breaks or incentives could spur more private sector investment in black neighborhoods, bridging the gap still further. 2. Policy reforms. Governments could reinforce anti-discrimination laws in lending and housing, providing a more equitable environment for businesses financed by the new communal funds. City-level equity zones could reserve prime commercial real estate or redevelop blighted areas for black entrepreneurs. 3. Acknowledgement and healing. An official government endorsement of reparative initiatives, beyond lip service, could facilitate a moral reckoning, fostering national unity and recognition that these efforts are integral to the nation's future prosperity, fulfilling America's promise without permission. In short, the U.S. government owes a colossal debt, and it can pay. History proves it. That said, waiting for an elusive political consensus or legislative epiphany is a surefire way to see another generation pass with minimal change. Instead, we, 1. Leverage our $1.8 trillion. The African American community commands substantial buying power. By rerouting more of that capital inward, through Marketplace 365 or similar platforms, we effectively jumpstart our own reparative processes. 2. Engage churches and grassroots. Faith institutions and local organizations become the scaffolding of a robust parallel economy, nurturing everything from microloans to large-scale property developments. 3. Pressure corporations for restitution. Through targeted consumer activism, we can force companies that profited from slavery or discriminatory practices to pay into our self-driven funds, thus fulfilling part of the debt the government has long neglected to enforce. 4. Invite, but not depend on, federal participation. If and when the government decides to act, it can join an infrastructure already in motion. This approach ensures that any official reparative acts serve as an accelerant, not the entire foundation. Conclusion: a legacy we refuse to leave unpaid. The last few chapters have laid out how mutual aid revival, AI-driven platforms, and nationwide fundraising can rebuild the lost black economic centers that once anchored our communities. These are not stopgap measures. They are a self-determined path to empowerment. Meanwhile, the moral and monetary debt owed by the U.S. government looms large, yet remains largely unaddressed. By acknowledging that capacity is never the true barrier, and that time has shown the government's willingness to bankroll colossal initiatives when sufficiently motivated, we shine a light on the dissonance of ignoring America's original moral debt. Indeed, no government aid or policy can restore centuries of plundered wealth in a single stroke. Yet any genuine future partnership can and should align with the movements already underway, ensuring that public funds bolster the thriving ecosystem we're building at the grassroots. Ultimately, the question isn't whether the government should pay. It absolutely should. The question is whether we, as African Americans, will wait on that promise or move forward now. Our answer, woven throughout this blueprint, is resolute. We refuse to wait. We are already building. And if Capitol Hill eventually decides to meet us where we stand, it will find a community that has long since taken its destiny into its own capable hands. Conclusion: standing on the shoulders of giants. We have journeyed through the painful history of African American economic destruction, traced the blueprint for modern-day restoration, and explored the unshakable spiritual roots that can inspire our movement. Now, as we stand at the threshold of action, it is essential to pause and honor the generations who built the very foundations of our struggle. From enslaved ancestors forced to cultivate wealth they could never own, To the free Black entrepreneurs who carved out self-sustaining enclaves despite harassment and terror, their courage anchors our own, honoring ancestral persistence. They survived the Middle Passage and centuries of chattel slavery. They outlasted Black codes, Jim Crow, and the bulldozers that razed our neighborhoods. Against impossible odds, they built robust economies. Banks, insurance companies, hotels, restaurants, barbershops, grocery stores, and schools, only to see them burned, buried, or seized by hostile laws. Our ancestors' resilience is a testament to the unbreakable human spirit. And they saw beyond oppression. From Tulsa to Rosewood to Charleston, their capacity to dream and create was unstoppable. They believed in group economics. Mutual aid societies were nothing new or radical. They were an organic expression of our people's cooperative spirit. Yes, they placed faith above fear. In times of devastation, they turned to each other, families, churches, lodges, neighbors, to rebuild what was lost. We stand, quite literally, on their shoulders, armed with their brilliance, tempered by their sacrifices, and emboldened by their legacy to ensure that this time, what we build will endure, the next generation's mandate. For too long, the goal was mere assimilation, to sit at certain lunch counters, work at specific jobs, or live in neighborhoods previously barred. But the new generation recognizes that we cannot be content simply being allowed into someone else's story. We must create our own, restoring the economic engines that once thrived in our communities and forging entirely new ones where needed. 1. Economic empowerment over assimilation. Younger African Americans increasingly see that true liberation demands ownership, equity, and intergenerational wealth, not merely the legal right to occupy the same spaces as everyone else. 2. Technological readiness. We live in an age of AI, data analytics, and digital platforms that can bypass the barriers that once suffocated our progress. This generation can harness these tools to skip past the gatekeepers who historically denied us loans, business permits, and real estate opportunities. 3. Global connection. Thanks to social media and the rise of diaspora networks, we can unite with fellow Africans and Afro-descendants worldwide. A localized economy can become part of a broader Pan-African powerhouse, circulating capital, culture, and innovation on a scale our ancestors could scarcely imagine. Immediate steps. Time to get practical. This is not a book meant to spark theoretical chatter. It is a blueprint for direct action. Here's where to begin. 1. Join or start a local marketplace. 365 chapter. If Marketplace 365 already has a presence in your city, volunteer time or resources. If not, start a chapter by gathering community leaders, faith institutions, and local entrepreneurs. So focus on pooling capital, investing in microloans, and identifying real estate for community ownership. 2. Mobilize your church or faith community. Share this book's key insights with your congregation. Encourage pastors and lay leaders to designate a Sunday or event for raising funds to seed local businesses through Marketplace 365 or a similar mutual aid initiative. And reinforce that faith and finance are not separate realms. They can jointly champion righteous economic empowerment. 3. Push local officials. Attend city council meetings, advocate for policies that support Black entrepreneurship, and confront discriminatory zoning or highway expansions in your area. And demand that any new development plan includes equitable investment in historically Black neighborhoods, preventing gentrification from displacing longtime residents. 4. Invest in Black-owned banks and businesses. Open checking accounts, savings accounts, or mortgages with Black-owned financial institutions. Patronize Black restaurants, shops, and service providers, and share your positive experiences on social media. Word of mouth is a powerful tool for sustaining Black commerce. 5. Leverage technology and data. Whether it's a local diaspora directory, a social media campaign, or a simple group chat, use technology to coordinate purchases from Black-owned businesses and track the economic impact. And support startups or existing tech hubs that uplift Black professionals in AI, coding, marketing, and data analytics. Tools that will future-proof our communities. Final charge. As we conclude, let us remember, apologies alone will never suffice for centuries of stolen labor, bulldozed neighborhoods, and deliberate underinvestment. The real power lies in our collective decision to create the future our ancestors were denied, with faith as our compass. technology at our disposal, and a resolute refusal to wait on reluctant institutions. We have every reason to believe that now is the moment. This movement is bigger than any one individual, church, or city. It is the destiny of a people long overdue for a renaissance in economic life. Will you stand on the shoulders of giants and take that next step? Will you be the one who helps rebuild what was lost? This time for keeps. We cannot be satisfied with apologies alone. We want and will create the future our ancestors were denied. The time is now. Let these words echo in your heart. Let them guide your next bold action. We've sketched a blueprint, illuminated by historical truths and sustained by spiritual conviction. The rest is up to each of us. Come, let us rebuild together.